How's it going, everybody, and welcome to the Airbnb Data Guys YouTube channel. Today, what we're going to go through are my absolute favorite Airbnbs that I have come across over the past like 6 to 8 years, somewhere within that range. I've studied a ridiculous amount of data, and when you do that, you come across listings that you just don't want to forget about. And so you put them on a wish list and you save them to be able to review them later. And so these are my absolute favorite listings. I've studied every single one of them fairly in depth, and I'm going to show off what I think are like the most interesting parts of the listings. I want to use the word cool, but it's not just the fact that they're cool. It's like, what are they doing that's allowing them to just stand out from the millions of Airbnbs that are out there, right? With that being said, though, this is also a cautionary tale, because I'm going to show you the data on these ones to prove to you the other reason why I love them, because they're almost all the top performing properties in their market that they're in the category that they're in, which is just such a hard thing to be able to do, right? But it's also going to be a bit of a cautionary tale, because a lot of other people have seen these listings, got really excited about them, and then tried to replicate them. And we're going to look at those listings a little bit too. I'm not going to spend a crazy amount of time on them, but I just want to show them, all right? And then at the end, I just want to wrap it all up and say, you know, what are the takeaways here? What have we learned from going through all of these listings? That's really what I want to be able to do as well, all right? So let's get into it. So what I'm showing you right now are my wish lists that I have saved through Airbnb, right? On Airbnb, you can heart a listing and you can categorize them into different wish lists, however you name them. I call this one my mains. So these are all my main Airbnbs that I've ever come across. And what I did was I went through a good amount of these ones and picked out like which ones were my absolute favorite, top of the top. And as you can see here, we're going to go through a lot of these different listings that I'm showing you right now. And a lot of them have stories behind them. Okay. Like, what makes them so great? Why is that? And then we're also going to go through the data on each one of these that I've pulled up as well, as you can see. Okay. So without further ado, let's get into this very first one, which is in Scottsdale, Arizona, which I am very, very familiar with. And this listing is performing at $275,000. It is the top performing 4-bedroom in this area of Scottsdale. So this like sort of downtown core, there's a little bit up here, but it's mainly just the downtown core. Now, as you'll see, 275 is actually quite a bit higher than most of the other people. There's a bit of me that just struggles to believe that it's actually doing 275, but when you look at this listing, you can kind of see why it would be doing that well. The only part that gets me about it is that it's actually a fairly small backyard. Now, here's something that actually is driving me nuts right off the bat. They actually put all of their listings in order of the living rooms very recently, and I think it's killing the excitement of this listing. This listing also has 196 photos, which I've almost always thought that that was just a huge mistake to do. However, when it comes to this listing, I'm intrigued by it, okay? Let me get down all... See, this is why it's killing it, because it used to go right into this backyard in these photos and the way they put it together, but it just doesn't now for whatever reason. So please fix that if you're seeing this. And if you have a listing out there that's in this category, fix it as well. The most interesting part about this listing is definitely the backyard. I think it's so perfectly manicured in the way that it's put together. You have these two nice pergolas here that are higher end pergolas that makes it feel a little bit more expensive. They even got the stone within the turf, which again gives it that luxury feel, but then they have these hanging lights. But what I really love about this listing is actually the way that they did this photo here. I think this small little tactic is one that I have replicated in a lot of different listings. What they have here is a putting green, but instead what they did was they added all these colorful yoga mats. They added the cornhole. They added the putting green over here. They have these big floaties. In other words, they took a really small space and they just filled it with a lot of different amenities and little things that people could be doing, and they showed them off so well. I genuinely think that the photos for this backyard show off every single last little aspect of what you could be doing in the backyard to make you fall in love with this listing. I just think there's so many little things that they've jammed back here, but it doesn't feel clustered. It doesn't feel like there's too much going on, and it's also very aesthetically pleasing. Now, here's the thing about this listing that I actually love more than most things, is that eventually we're going to get to these nighttime photos, and I think their nighttime photos are some of the coolest. Like, look at the way they put these together with the hanging lights. You got the neon light going over here. This is perfectly edited. It shows it off so well. There's something about the way this listing is put together that it just makes me fall in love with it, and I think everybody else has fallen in love with it too when they come through this listing. And again, these nighttime photos, I don't know who the photographer is on this listing, but if I had listings out this way, I'd be trying to figure out who this photographer is and try to bring them out so they could put together these photos just as well for my own personal listing. So without further ado, this listing, I love it because I think they did an amazing job with the amount of space that they had and the way that they took these photos on the outside to really show off every single last little aspect of this home. And with a smaller listing, they are hitting $275,000 a year, and they're outpacing everybody else in the area. The average that people do in this area is between like 120 and 160. That's if you're like a good listing, but you know, or a decent listing. There's a lot of people making a lot less. That's what I'm trying to get at, right? Let's move on to the next listing, which is going to be quite a bit different in comparison to the last one we were just looking at. This one is in Willow, New York, which is essentially just upstate New York. It's right outside of Socrates, kind of in that Woodstock area. Pretty much anybody who is in New York and goes to upstate New York, they're pretty much following this river to a lot of the different little places. But this listing, now it's not the most perfect listing. I think that there's some aspects of this that they could have made it a little bit sexier, a little bit more desirable. As an example, this is such a cool tub. Why are there not hanging lights? Why is this not open? Why are there not people in there? A lot of little things that they could have done. But what I love about this listing is that they didn't go with the regular old traditional A-frame or box style or whatever you want to call it. They didn't take a regular listing and just plop it down beside this water. They instead hired an architect who took the land that they had here and created a completely different design that we've almost never seen. And it feels like this spaceship has landed beside this water, but it's so aesthetically pleasing to the area. And the massive window looking right out the lake, like it's so perfect. So what I guess I'm trying to say is that, you know, if I were to be considering to build within an area and I wanted to create something beautiful that was a piece of art that I know would also drive a ton of revenue because it's so beautiful, hiring an architect, spending a little bit more to bring something together that looks like this clearly is worth it, right? Like, look at the way that this is shaped, the way that it looks. It's a one of one, right? And obviously it's performing extremely well. So it's one of the top performers within the entire upstate New York. It is actually the number one bedroom in the entire upstate New York. That is one of the most competitive markets to be in. And instead of taking a regular shaped house and putting a pool behind it, they created something beautiful. And yes, this A-frame here is doing 105, but this one's doing 143,000, and it made this video because it is that beautiful and it is that cool of a listing, right? Again, a lot of these are just cool, but again, the takeaway is hiring an architect to create a one of one is creating a piece of art that allows you to then be able to be one of the absolute top performers if you can kind of pull it all together, right? Now, this next one, this one here, I find fascinating. I genuinely do, because there's nothing special about the home. There's nothing special about the area. They have a small listing, but through design, they have actually been able to be one of the top performers in this area. So they're not the tippity top best listing in the entire area. So if we actually go and look at all these listings, they're making $91,000 a year. Yes, there's some other people making more, but not significantly more. But what is interesting about this listing, guys, is that the size of it is so much smaller than all these other listings in the area. And I'm not going to go through them all. If you want to go look it up, you saw where this one's located. You can go and take a look at all the other listings in this area that are top performers. But this one is so small. It has a small living room. This is the whole living room here. Then you have a dining room that's almost in the kitchen. Like, it's kind of like a part of the kitchen island, right? But because of the style that they give, which is like this retro sort of, I apologize, I don't know if this is the 50s, the 60s, or whatever, but they have this retro style to it all the way through. The way they took the photos, the aesthetics of this listing is making it so cool. I'm gonna use that word a lot, but it's a vibe. It's a thing that people want. Even using the word vibe is such a weird thing for me to say as a 31-year-old, right? But it fits. They're creating a space that is aesthetically pleasing, and it's going to give people what they want. And even though it's a smaller space, they could care less. They just want a listing that has this feel and this look and the way it's put together. Even the outside area is not even that big of an area, and there's not that many outdoor amenities, which is kind of crazy to think. But I do love the photos are done extremely well. But really what this all comes down to is just the fact that they took a really small space and they gave it a very aesthetically pleasing design that was very different than everybody else. They took a 50s or 60s, whatever it is, and they turned it into that sort of retro style cabin. And I think it's impressive. I genuinely think it's really impressive. It's more impressive if you stop the video right now, which, you know, come back to it. But if you stop the video and go look at Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, and take a look at the other top performers and how big those homes are, and the fact that they're on the water and all these different things, and the fact that this home is able to compete, it's actually pretty impressive. Okay, moving on to the next one here. This one is by Christy Wolf. If anyone knows Christy, you know that she has the greatest Airbnb portfolio for unique homes across probably the entire world at this point. Christy has done some of the most amazing listings. This one is more of a story for me. I think it's beautiful. I think it is so beautiful. I think the way that it is done is incredible. Unfortunately, I could not find this one on AirDNA for the life of me. I was looking around. Christy, I don't know why, but they're not showing your data on AirDNA. But this listing is impressive. And let me actually just explain for a second why it's so impressive. Because Christy here, the story behind it is that this was her very first listing that she got. I'm 99% sure that she built this listing with roughly around $11,000, and she brought it all together in Hawaii on the Big Island, in a part of the Big Island that is not as desirable as the rest of Hawaii, right? So the land was a lot cheaper for her to be able to get this listing. Now, I believe the land cost like $12,000, and she built the entire, you know, one bedroom for another $10,000 to $15,000, somewhere within that range. It was all very minimal in the amount that she had to spend to be able to put this listing up, but then she created it into this dreamy tropical treehouse, which is exactly what it is. And like, it's such a perfect romantic getaway for people. But what I love about this listing so much is that she was all in like cash, because she paid for the land over a certain period of time, right? She didn't pay for the land all at once, but she was all in on this listing for under $15,000 right at the get-go. And this listing has made about $100,000 every single year for, I believe, 10 years now. Since the last I interviewed her, it's on my YouTube channel. You can go look it up, but I believe it's been 10 years, which is mind-boggling that you can create, again, another piece of art in the way that it's put together and be able to cash flow a ridiculous amount for a decade. And she's, again, like, imagining having this one Airbnb listing and then being able to pretty well do whatever you want for the next 10 years because of this one Airbnb that you could without a doubt manage remotely, which she without a doubt does. And now she's opened up many more. So this one is beautiful, but the story behind it is even more beautiful. I love this one. So moving on from here, we're going into the Alpine cabin. This one actually has a twin, so there's two of these. And as you can see right here, so you got this one and this one. They are both sort of northern Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. You know, they're kind of creating that 2-hour drive distance away from Atlanta to create a little bit of a getaway. They're both one bedrooms, and they're both absolutely killing it when it comes to the amount of money that they're making. Now, there's some other listings out here that are definitely doing well, right? But nobody's doing nearly as well as what they're doing. This is where we're going to get into that more of that cautionary tale of like what to be worried about as you're getting into these listings, right? But with this one, what I absolutely love about it, right, is just the deck. Yeah, I can't, like, I'm not even going to explain anything else because this video is going to be extraordinarily long if I go into too much detail in every single listing. But these people understood that they're on the side of a hill. And so then therefore, if they want to create a romantic getaway that is in the woods but allows people to get outside, they need to give them that space. And so they made a deck on a one bedroom that was almost the same size as the one bedroom, and then they put all of the different amenities out there to create a space where people could actually hang out. That's what you got to do. That's what you got to do, and it's clearly working, right? Because they have this swinging hammock bed that they can both lay on. There's some chairs here. There's a barbecue over here. There's a bar or here so they can sit and look out at the view. They got a fire pit right there, and obviously the hot tub. And they've got all of that wrapped up on this one deck for two people to enjoy their honeymoon, maybe their anniversary. It's a special occasion listing for couples, and it's beautifully done. Moving on from this one, we've got another Atlanta, Georgia listing. So the other one was, you know, Georgia, not Atlanta, but close to. And this one is so hard to replicate and to understand why it's so great. This actually was one of the most hearted Airbnb listings in, I think, the world at one point. And I understand why. It's just, I'm at a loss for words to explain this one. So I'm just going to go through some of these photos for a moment here so you can just appreciate this listing. So obviously we have a treehouse, right? Now, the bed popping out of the window here is next level. That is something that you're just not going to see in a lot of these other listings. What's crazy is like this photo is not a great photo, but it creates this amazing beauty in the listing and you know what you're kind of getting yourself into, and all these hanging lights and the rustic furniture that they used and the old windows that they used to bring it together. But really, like, I truly believe this drawbridge from one end to the other is really what's capping this off, because you're not just getting one little treehouse that you're kind of stuck in. You can go from one area to the next area, and they've created like a living room, a treehouse, a bedroom treehouse, and you go from one to the other. And I think that is one of the main aspects here that's really tying this together. But on top of that, again, it's all rustic, and it feels like it's been here forever. Even like the way they use this, they just restored and reused a lot of different material to bring this together and to create a one of one. And this is where I'm going to show off a little bit of the cautionary tale that I was referring to, and we're going to do some more of this as we continue to go through. But this listing, again, is another one I wasn't able to find, unfortunately, within the data. I do not know why, but I know it's absolutely crushing it. However, if you take a look, we look at Atlanta, and then we go and look at just the one bedrooms in Atlanta, and we organize them from who's making the most to who's making the least. You can see the very first one here is a magical treehouse, right? Making $90,000 a year. But if we keep scrolling, you can actually see that we have another little yurt here. We have a alpaca cottage. What I'm trying to show you is that we have properties that are similar to this one that was absolutely crushing it. And here's another one right here, the treasure hunt treehouse. And here's another treehouse. And these ones are making 50 and 46,000. Here's another, airstream, which is not the same idea, but it's a similar idea. And this one's only doing 45. Now I know for a fact that the one I just showed you is definitely doing up here in some sort of range, because I don't know why it's not on here, but I know it's doing extremely well, as it was on here at one point. What I'm trying to show you guys is that there's people that saw that listing that lived in Atlanta that thought, I'm going to recreate that. I'm going to try and bring that together. And as you can see, they're making a fraction of it, because this listing isn't hitting in the same way that other listing was hitting. And so that's a bit of the cautionary tale, that if you're going to try and replicate something that looks like this is art, guys. This is the way this is put together. This is just absolutely beautiful. You've got to put your heart and soul into it and really bring it together, because it's going to be hard to replicate something like this unless you do it in your own way. And we'll kind of get to that when we get to the end of the video, where we're going to wrap up sort of my key thoughts on a lot of these listings. All right. With that being said, we're going to do a bit of a Joshua Tree tour here and go through some of the best listings I've come across in Joshua Tree, and ones that I think stand out more than the other ones altogether. Now, Joshua Tree and upstate New York are two areas that you should be studying like the back of your hand, because these two areas have some of the absolute best listings across all of America, because you have some of the most creative people in the entire world from New York and LA that are using these areas as sort of like their creative dumping ground to create amazing listings. And obviously there's a lot of money in both these areas too. What I'm trying to say is that if you study both of these areas, you can steal a lot of the most brilliant ideas about these listings and bring them to your small town or anywhere else in America to make your listing as amazing as these listings. I truly, truly believe that the greatest listings in America are in Joshua Tree in upstate New York, at least the highest density of listings. Okay. So here we're going to go through this one in Joshua Tree. This one during COVID was making like $300,000 a year. It was absolutely insane. It had a huge drop off in the amount that it was making. It's down to about 134 apparently, but it's only a 2-bedroom as well. So keep that in mind. It's only a 2-bedroom. Yes, there are other 2-bedrooms that are performing better within this area, but I still think this one, we have a lot to learn from this one. Again, they have their photos in the order ranking here. Patrick, you got to change that, man. He's the guy who's overseeing this one. But what I want to show off, and what I love about this listing probably more than anything, are actually the photos. So these lifestyle photos, I'm going to get to some of these ones that are out here because I genuinely think they're a lot better. These lifestyle photos with this background and the way that this property comes together, at the time, this was extraordinarily rare to have these types of photos like this one right here. Now, what I want to point out here is, one, you have the right demographic. They have the groups of friends that are coming together. They're also dressed in the way that you would expect people from LA going out to Joshua Tree would look, right? And then on top of that, they added a filter to this image that gives it a bit of a hue, so it actually fits into this desert feel, right? And you'll notice a lot of the photos within this area have that same sort of feel. When I see this photo, I just see my friend group sitting there enjoying this desert oasis type location and having a good time. And it creates this thing in my mind that goes, wow, I really want to stay at this listing. And the more you go through these photos, because look at a photo like this compared to that photo there, that is a night and day difference photo of the emotions that are going to be pulled up inside of somebody when they're going to look to book this listing. And it makes a world of a difference to how they actually end up booking the property. Now, another thing I want to point out here while we're looking at this outside of the listing is if you actually look past this wood, you can see the regular home, right? You can just see the white wall of this home. This whole wood fencing, I believe, was put in purely for aesthetic purposes and to fit in a little bit better with that desert feel, because it's not structural. This is not the outside of the house. There's a whole space in between there, which we just saw from here, right? So this is this entire space. And so I love this because this is so brilliant in a way where you take a regular Joshua Tree home that doesn't feel all that special, all that crazy, and then you add this wood wall around it, and all of a sudden it has this almost like cabin-esque Joshua Tree desert feel to it, right? And to the point where it can be your first photo for years and stand out. It doesn't feel like a regular home anymore when we look at it, right? Anyways, I think you guys get the idea. I'm trying to say a word and it's not coming out of my mouth the way I want it to. Structural. It doesn't hold up the walls is what I'm trying to say there. All right. But then we have, as you can see, we have more photos here that clearly show off how well the lifestyle photos, with this one genuinely being one of my absolute favorites, because I'm a guy who's going to wake up in the morning, have a coffee. I want to sit by myself, drink that coffee, take in the view. When I see this, I'm like, I want to recreate this moment, and therefore I want to book the listing. All right. And so that's why I think that this is one of the best listings I've come across as well over the years. Again, there are other ones that are outperforming it nowadays with the amount that they're making. I think this is another great example of a listing that if you were to go and look at it a little bit more in depth, it's not a luxury listing by any means. It's also not a new build. It's nothing along those lines. Like you look at some of these listings, these are like new build Joshua Tree properties that are being put together that are allowing them to hit the numbers that they're hitting, whereas this is more of like an older one with a wood fence put around it. So that gives you the idea. With that being said, let's move on to this next one that's also in Joshua Tree. It's also a 2-bedroom. As you saw from looking through this, maybe you didn't notice it, but this one's doing better. It's doing $180,000 a year. I have to say though, this listing is going to be nearly impossible to replicate. The story behind this is that this listing is actually a person who works on movie sets or TV sets or something along those lines, and gets a lot of props from those and things like this, which he then takes and brings to the listing to make it even cooler and better and make it more exciting and different things like that. There's a really good example of this, like even in this photo here, all these extra little knickknacks and whatnot are kind of from the movie scenes and whatnot. Okay. So it's going to be a hard thing to replicate, but I absolutely love this listing so much. And I actually just discovered it, I think like 2-3 weeks ago, and I just want to go through it. So first off, that sign is not real. I thought it was for a moment, and I was like, that is the coolest, craziest thing that I've ever seen on Airbnb. It's not, but how cool is it to kind of show off the listing, right? What I love about this listing is just that it's going to be nearly impossible to replicate, right? Again, I've already mentioned that, but let's take some of the ideas that they've done here and kind of bring it to your listings. So obviously this mod pool and the way it's put together, this is a good example of how there's a lot of different areas to this listing. So that's really what I'm trying to get across with this listing, is they have a lot of different areas that they've kind of created into their own little space. And each one of them brings out a piece of the person when they want to book it, right? It's hitting somebody in a different way each time. So obviously you have your deck with your mod pool and then the hot tub, and this is creating that very standard sort of thing that we've seen a lot, right? Now they also have this outdoor fire pit. It's really well put together, and it's going to create a nice little environment for people to hang out at night. Now it's a little bit different than your regular fire pit, but there's kind of more to it. Now it's also out in Joshua Tree. And so they have all this aesthetic of different clothing and whatnot that you can try on for photo shoots, which is going to make it a great place for people who want to go just for the Instagram photo that they're going to take after that. They have another section here where the sauna, and it's just sitting out there. Again, this is more of the idea of adding a ton of amenities, but I think like this is actually my favorite example out of all of this. Okay. Because you may be thinking, like, why, John? Why would that be, out of all these things that you just showed me from this property, why in the world would this be your favorite? Well, this, when people are thinking about doing amenities, they think to themselves like, hey, I'm going to do an archery thing or a putting green, right? And they just kind of do just that. They do the absolute basics of it, but they don't create it into this kind of cool setting that fits the environment of the area that they're in. Whereas as you can see here, like they went out of the way to add the hay bales. They went out of the way to add multiple different spots that you can target, and they're all different from one to the other. And they have signs behind here that kind of bring it together. What I have noticed over the time of doing this, and I'm not a designer by any means, but what I have noticed is that the extra aesthetics, these little things down here and the signs, those are the things that create a space. And those little things bring it all together And when we see that and we look at it, we're like, oh, that's so cool, right? Like that's just what kind of comes out when you see it and when you feel it. Because if it was just this here backed up by even just haze and didn't have all of this, it just wouldn't hit the same, right? It just wouldn't do the same thing that you are feeling right now when you see this photo. So what I'm trying to say when it comes to this listing specifically is, yes, it is way overdone and it's way over budget. It probably doesn't even make financial sense to do all this stuff, but steal the little ideas, steal these little aesthetics and use that stuff to create the space that you want to create, and use the lifestyle photos in a way to be able to see how you can bring these things together and try to take something, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's just 10% of this listing, and bring it to your own listing. I think it's going to benefit you. Okay. Now, this next one here has been one that I have talked about many times. I've made multiple different videos on it. I genuinely think it is so perfectly crafted. Let's put it that way, the way it's put together. This is the Wanderlust Airstream. It's doing about $94,000 a year. Again, it's not the top performing listing as a one bedroom in the area, but it's an Airstream, whereas all these other ones are like brand new builds and these amazing structures and all these different little things. And so for what this thing is, it's impressive of what it's been able to do. Again, we have these photos organized. I can't stand it. It's driving me nuts. But let's take a look here, right? What I love about this listing and how it's put together is actually the organization of how it's put together, which usually is not the most ideal thing to do, but for whatever reason, it's just hitting beautifully here. The fact that they put a path from the deck over to the shower, over to wherever else this leads to, I think it's kind of brilliant, because now people can walk around bare feet without getting their feet dirty, but it also ties all these different amenities together. They're no longer just sitting there randomly in these different spots. They're all one, right? And even the fire pit, with the way that it has this around here and the way that it has different types of seating around there, this listing is actually a listing that used this as an example when it came to TechFester to explain to them that we need to have paths that tie our different amenities together so they all feel like it's one big space and not just kind of scattered. And we've done that a lot with a lot of different listings, and it works. It does make it feel like it's all one little space. And even this here, and the way that this goes all the way around, that was another sort of aspect that I wanted to bring to a lot of the TechFester properties, because I thought that instead of just having chairs on the dirt and a thing around it, it made it its own space. It made it its own amenity. It just does something different when you're looking at it, when you compare it directly to a space that doesn't have the outline around there. Now, go look at the last video I made, which is about, ranking different fire pits, and you will very easily be able to see exactly what I mean when you look at all the really bad fire pit setups compared to the really great fire pit setups. It's a night and day difference, and this does something, okay? So my main takeaway from this listing is actually just these paths and the way they put this together. The whole thing is just beautifully done. Again, another piece of art, in my opinion. Getting out of Joshua Tree and hopping over to the Dunlop Hollow A-frame, hands down, one of the absolute greatest Airbnbs to ever hit the market. And there is a fan club around this listing. Okay. I've made multiple different videos about this one, and almost every single time it goes viral because people just love it. They love it. There's something about it that people love. And this is going to be another cautionary tale when it comes to this one. I think what really does it for this listing, right, is it comes back to the architecture. And I was talking about this before with the Willow property, right? The one out in Willow, New York, that the sort of spaceship looking listing, and the way that they use the architecture to really bring it together. Now you might be looking at this and being like, John, literally as you were talking about that Willow property, the one in Willow, you said how it's not just another A-frame. And now I'm looking at an A-frame and you're saying the architecture is beautiful. But what I want to point out here is it's actually the windows that are what I believe to be brilliant. I've studied it a lot, okay? There is something about this A-frame specifically compared to all of the other A-frames that makes this one go viral consistently in comparison to those ones. And I genuinely believe it has to do with the way the windows are put together here and the wood that you have here. So first off, you have a perfect triangle. It's elevated off the ground. That does something. Now, obviously they had to do that, but I think that genuinely does something because it just makes it a triangle. Instead of closing this off, they made it all wide open with these windows, and then every window is also a triangle, and they go upwards and downwards triangles, right? And then there's a triangle over here that leads up to the door that allows you to stand out on the deck. This is a one of one when it was created. They were selling the designs to this property so you could actually go and recreate it yourself, and other people have recreated it. Nobody's done nearly as well as what this listing has done, but the design of this stands out and it's so impressive. I don't know. It's one of these other ones, guys, where I'm just at a loss for words in the way that's put together. Now, keep in mind, it's in a great location. So it's right outside of a national park in Ohio, where there's not a lot to go to do in Ohio. So this is like in one of the best possible locations, but there's a lot of other listings in this area that are also crushing it. And this listing is doing about $272,000 a year. It's been doing that consistently over and over again. And these people have even gone out and created a cave listing right down the street, which I strongly recommend you go and take a look at these two and check them out. It's very impressive what they've been able to do. Okay. But here is my cautionary tale to this one. The cautionary tale is that this one's doing 272. And a lot of people have been trying to recreate or compete with this listing in this area, and they haven't even gotten close. But there's one that stands out the most to me, which is this one right here. And I genuinely think that this is another unbelievably beautiful listing that, technically should be doing better. It's also a 3-bedroom, and it's 2 container homes that are on top of each other. And it does have that, aesthetically pleasing black look and the way the photos are taken and all these different things. However, this listing is making $153,000. Now, you're probably thinking like, that's still great. You know what I mean? To build something make $153,000, I'm sure they're still making a killing, but this property's making $120,000 less in comparison to the Dunlop Hollow. And I'm sure there's a thousand reasons behind it, but the way that this listing looks just pulls people in. And I really do believe that if you can create a listing that has that sort of viral feel to it, and the hard part is you don't know what goes viral. I've tried. You genuinely have no idea what's going to go viral before you create it. But there's something about this one that makes people just drop their jaws when they see it. And so I'm going to shut up about it because I'm not even saying anything useful here. It's just a beautiful, beautiful listing and extraordinarily well done. All right, let's move on from here and get to the next one in our category, which is going to be this Austin, Texas property. So let's throw in a city property here. Now this one's newer. It only has about 12 reviews, but I think this property will end up doing somewhere around $300,000 to $400,000 for the year. Already getting like, I made a video about it recently. Within the first 16 days, it had like $150,000 booked for only 60 days, right? So ridiculous amount. Obviously it's going to be a ton of weekends, and the nightly rate was like 1,600, something along those lines. And I think it's on pace to do like 350, somewhere around there. Okay. So obviously this listing is doing something really, really well. And it's kind of, right here within Austin, Texas, pretty close to the downtown core. It's a genuinely absolutely beautiful listing. I'm not going to pat myself too much on the back here, but this guy here did hire us. Scott did hire us to be able to do an optimization. I said, hey, here's everything that I think you need to do to this listing to bring it together. And then they brought in It's Bridget Bitch Instagram to design it with the company Funkit. And I think they absolutely crushed it. This here was actually one of my favorite parts because they had a whole front yard that was fenced. So the front yard was actually fenced, so nobody could see into it. And there was a ton of space there. And I was like, hey, you don't really have that big of a backyard. So why don't you take advantage of this front yard and bring even more amenities in here? And so I guess if there's any takeaways from this property is that obviously it's in a perfect location, and obviously it's a brand new build. And so then therefore those 2 reasons alone would allow you to make a killing in Austin, right? But it also brought a lot of color together. It filled the backyard with amenities. It even took advantage of the front yard to do amenities as well. It did an amazing job with the photos. It did an amazing job with the design on the interior to really hit this like cool, fun vibe. I actually, when I look at this listing, I think of this one over here where they had a smaller backyard and they did an amazing job bringing it all together. And so that's my take on this listing. Again, it's the same idea as the very first one there, kind of wrapping up and bringing it all together. And so now we're going to move on to Wimberley, Texas, which is just outside of Austin. And this listing here keeps making more money. So at one point it was making 143. Now it's all the way up to 205, which is, one of the top performing. It is a top performing 4-bedroom in the Wimberley area. And I think it has something to do with the backyard. So yes, the property on the inside is unique. It's somewhat a one of a kind. The design of this property is very aesthetically pleasing in the way that it's put together. It is clean. It's well done. It's nothing over the top. What I really want to show off on this one is the backyard, because I have studied this backyard to try to understand how to maximize the backyards that I would be putting together as well. And There's something about this one that I just love. So I'm going to do my best, just like I've been doing with all these other properties, to show you why I think this one is doing so well. Okay. So first off, the hanging lights through the entire backyard, all the way through, beautiful. Not just one area, the whole thing, the whole backyard is lit up. So well done. I love that they have the trees to be able to take advantage of that. That's obviously going to make a big difference for this, right? However, let's take a bit of a closer look. The photos are great. That's a given. But what I actually love about this too is these chairs, they're not super cheap chairs. So obviously not a lot in this property is going to be super cheap, but these are good chairs. It's a perfect fire pit. Even the fire pit is not just like a wood burning fire. It is a propane fire pit, which I actually think hits the crowd for this better. I could just, for whatever reason, this property just gives off the feeling that these people are going to want a propane fire pit, not a real fire pit, right? And obviously it's working for them, so good for them. Personally, I want that wood burning fire pit. That's just me though. Anyways, let's point out the little things here. Crisscross lights, but also the fact that they're edited and it's brightened up the sky in the back. They've got the lights on inside the house. All this is making this really, really bright, really, really nice. But the chairs are also good quality, but they also have a blanket on the back of every single chair. That little thing there gets me because that is showing hospitality. That is showing that they care. That's showing that they're going the extra mile, that this property is worth that extra little bit to stay at. It's worth to stay here because we have thought of the little things. I love that about this listing. And there's even some other aspects of it with the chairs. I got to find it. I got to find all these little things because I don't have it too ready. So here's another example of it with the blankets that they have on these chairs, which are perfectly fitting to the area, right? I've talked about this in a couple of other homes where you got to have the right design to hit the area, and they're nailing it with the blanket they have there as well. So I just thought that this little setup here, creating a little conversation piece, was really, really well done. Also, the photos of it are perfectly done on top of that. Then there's also the dining table. I love this dining table. You want to know why? Because it's just randomly placed back here out in the weather. Normally they would be underneath over here, something like that. It's set up perfectly, right? So they have the whole table is set between the cups, the napkins, and the placemats. It all fits in the design. Everything fits in the design. And again, it's going that extra little mile to say like, hey, we've curated a space that is going to give you the experience that you're looking for. We're not going to cheap out on the glasses that you're going to be drinking because we know that that is also a part of the design and a part of the fit. But really what I love about this sort of table setup here is the table. Okay, the table is an old rustic table, and that old rustic table fits this setting so perfectly. And they did not buy it from IKEA, and they did not buy it from Wayfair. They had to source this table to be able to find something that was going to fit perfectly back here. That's going the extra mile, guys. That stuff makes a difference. And also, all the chairs are black. That fits in with the black chairs over here. That fits in with the black chairs over there. It all comes together. It's the little things for me. It's the little things for me that really do it. I genuinely think this is a perfectly put together backyard. Even the way they have this set up over here, the black and the white hits that like high-end New York feel, which, you know, again, maybe they took the idea from upstate New York because they're now just outside of Austin, and Austin is one of the biggest growing cities in America. And so they're going to have those same type of clientele, those high net worth individuals who want that kind of stuff. And if this is what they're getting in like upstate New York, why wouldn't it work here too, right? It does fit into the vibe, and that black and white kind of gives it a bit of a more higher end feel. So all of these things create what I would consider to be one of like the nicest put together backyards for creating wilderness with luxury and care and cabin and the stone here. Now I know you can't really do much about the stone, and it's not much of a takeaway, but it's just so well crafted. All right, now with all of that being said, the whole concept of this video, guys, in case you didn't catch on, was to show you these beautiful listings, but they're almost all impossible to replicate. They're either extremely unique, very rare. You'd have to build them, and you'd have to use old materials to really give it that vibe and make it look cool. And so it's one of these like scenarios where it's almost impossible to recreate, right? And so the whole purpose of the video was to say, take the small ideas that are working, take all these little ideas, go find a home that is not a luxury home, that is not a unique home, that is nothing spectacular, and make it spectacular. through these design ideas, through these amenities ideas, through the way the photos are taken, the way the fire pits are set up. Do that with a regular property that you can buy at an affordable price, and you will be able to create an amazing listing. And so I'm going to show you one that I would consider to be exactly that. One of the best case scenarios of taking a regular home and making it spectacular. So you can see this listing here. I'm not going to spend a crazy amount of time going through all the different amenities and the way the photos are taken. I think you can get the idea after seeing how much I pay attention to all these different little things. You can see how we took a lot of that and brought it to this aspect of this home here. But what I want to show you guys is that this is one of the top performing listings in the market that it's in. And it's also a fraction of the cost in comparison to the other top performing properties. Just to give you actual numbers here, this property costs less than $1 million. It's doing as well as other properties that cost $2 million. Half the price, same revenue. That's how you get cash flow, okay? So take a look at the kitchen. This is not a luxury property whatsoever. It's not luxury, even a little bit. The way it's put together, it's not a luxury property, and yet it's hitting luxury property revenue. And it's because you take all those ideas and you bring it together. And this is my specialty. Okay, so just give me 2 seconds here to tell you about my property finder service, which is where you can hire me to be able to find you a property that is an average looking property, and you can figure out how to put it together in a way that is going to make it one of the top performing listings within the market that you're going to go into. That's what I do best. And if you don't have the time to do it yourself, you can hire me. You can hire me now. You haven't been able to hire me ever until very, very recently. If you do want to do so, go to the link down below, schedule a call, talk with somebody on my team, learn about what it's like to be able to hire me and my team, because it's not just me nowadays. We got a team of analysts to be able to ensure you guys are doing this properly and getting the best possible properties, but you can hire us to be able to do that. All right, that's it. I'm going to shut up. That's all. Now, as you can see, I've got a couple of different wish lists here. I've got this wish list and this wish list down below. You can grab them. You just got to trade your email, and then you can have the wish list. All right. And then it's got all of these listings that you can then go study yourself to learn the little things that I was talking about. Right. With that being said, before we sign off, I just want to give one little cautionary tale, because it's great to look at all these listings and to think to yourself, I can do this too, and pound your chest and think that you're going to be able to make it happen. And I want you to be able to make it happen. I genuinely want you to be able to make this happen. I want you to be able to go out there and create these amazing listings, just like other people have been able to do. And if they've been able to do it, why the hell can't you do it? There's absolutely no reason. With that being said, if you're going to do this, okay, please just study these listings and try to understand the nuances that are allowing them to do what they are doing. If you're going to go recreate a treehouse in Atlanta, you need to understand the tiniest little things that are allowing that to happen, because otherwise you're going to make half the revenue of all these other listings, and then you're just not going to be able to have the investment that you thought you were going to have, and it might end up being a giant waste of time. And that would suck. That genuinely would suck. And I don't want you to do that because I just showed off some of the coolest listings ever, and you're like, oh, I could go do that too, right? That's not the idea here. The idea here is that if you are going to do it, you got to use every single last bit of knowledge that you can to replicate it. And if you don't nail it on day one, go back and fix it. Go back and do something different. Save a little bit of money on the side just in case. Or when you start to make a little bit of money, go back and reinvest it to make it that beautiful listing. The listings that I showed you are art. They are so beautifully put together and so well done. And there's something about them that it's hard to find words to explain why someone like myself or you who's still watching this is like falling in love with the listings as you're looking at them, right? It's like genuinely a piece of art that you look at and you're like, I don't understand why. I'm staring at this still, but I can't look away. And that's a hard thing to replicate. And so if you are going to go out there and try to do this, put your heart and soul into it, because I think it's going to make a difference. And if you do that, you're going to see the return that you want to see. I believe you will see the return that you want to see if you truly put your heart and soul into these to really create something that is a piece of art. And that's all. All right, guys, have a good day.